Hi guys, this is Anna and this is going to be my part 1 of the books I've read in January 2017. And I thought what I will do is I will just talk about the books I have read for Diverseathon, which was running throughout the last week and finished this morning, beginning of Sunday. So in this readathon I was thinking of reading something between 3 to 5 books, and I had a separate video showing you my TBR. So out of the 5 books I've talked about, I've managed to read 4, which I think was pretty good for me, considering I actually had a migraine for 2 days and one of those days I didn't read anything. So I've read 4 books, 3 of them deal with slavery and then one of them was about depression. 2 books I gave 5 stars, 1 book at 4 and 1 unfortunately I was really not interested in and I gave it 3. So the first book I've read and I gave 5 stars to is Color Purple by Alice Walker. It deals with domestic abuse. It deals with race in both United States and in Africa in the early 20th century, the role of the woman, the way the woman is treated within the family and then the social strata. It deals with homosexuality or lesbianism as well, and the entire novel is written as a series of letters, so it has a very distinctive voice, and the letters are addressed to 3 people. Well, one of them is God, so the main protagonist of this whole novel, Sylvia, so she writes to God and then eventually she writes to her sister Nettie as well, and then part of the novel are letters from her sister Nettie to her. We follow the life of the main character in this novel from the time she's about 14 and she has been raped within her family. She has given birth to a son and a daughter who had been taken away from her, and for a long time she thought they were dead, but they ended up being adopted by a wealthy religious Christian family. They were raised as their own and they end up having a very interesting life. Her younger sister Nettie is saved by her from a very similar upbringing, and Nettie escapes and then ends up being one of the missionaries to the Africa, where she tried to educate the children in Africa. Then Sybil ends up being forced married to Mr. It's not a happy marriage, it's a marriage of convenience because he's a widower, his wife was murdered or killed by her lover, and he has children, and so basically she ends up enslaved in a marriage. She has to do all the chores, all the work in the house. Husband sleeps with her whenever he feels like. He brings his mistress into the house and she ends up falling in love with the mistress. It might sound like it's a lot of grief in this novel, but to be honest, you end up feeling happy towards the end of it because it tells you about the sisterhood of women, how women from different walks of life end up being the support system for each other. However difficult your life is, however miserable you might feel, however you might just want to die some days, there are always people who will offer you the shoulder to lean on and listen and offer you advice. So you end up feeling really good. And towards the end of the book she reconciles with her husband. They've been estranged for several years, they end up being just friends. She has her own house, she has her own business, and she ends up with lots of friends and a family, despite being a woman of color, a very, very poor birth, with a horrible start in life. I will highly, highly recommend Color Purple. It's a beautiful book which I'm sure I will read again. The second book I have given 5 stars to is the Belgium by Sylvia Plath, and that book deals with depression. We meet Esther, a beautiful and smart girl, and we basically follow her life, how she goes from being seemingly normal and then slowly succumbing into the bouts of depression and being treated in a mental institution with something we don't really do nowadays, which is electrocutions. Electrocutions are now being used again to treat some mental problems, but not depression. And I found that book immensely moving and very, very personal because I do struggle with depression, nowhere near as severe as hers, but nonetheless there are some bits in that book I could just completely relate to. I could relate to her being 19 particularly, and the thoughts which were running through her head, because She basically had the whole world as her oyster. She was beautiful, she was a successful model on her summer assignment, she was doing an internship in a publishing body in New York, and she wanted to be a writer. She had best grades in her school, she had a boyfriend, and she decided, not just the boyfriend, she had the fiance, but she decided to break it off with him. And it just ends up slowly crumbling all around her, and it's just very, very sad the way it ends. But the way it's written, you know that Sylvia Plath had experienced this. And the saddest thing is when the book was published in 1963, she ended up taking her life very, very shortly afterwards, after the book was published. And when you read the book, you know that the person who's written it must have suffered with depression, because this is not something you can just read about and write. It would not come as personal. The strength of the book is how personal and real the account is, despite it being written in the 1950s and set in New York, and then in a small town just off Boston. I will highly, highly, highly recommend it, but you have to know what you're getting into, because personally I found that book more touching that I found The Color Purple. And you would say, well, maybe because I'm not black, I did not experience slavery in my family, yes, but I have slavery. I had suffered from depression. So wonderful book, but I felt very, very down after reading it for about 3-4 days. Like, I couldn't, everything else I was reading was influenced by that book. The third book I have finished, and that is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I'm gonna put the picture over here. The book was given to me by Annette Galley for review. It has been published in America last year and published this month by the Penguin Viking Press, so I had it electronically. The hype surrounding this book was immense. I did like it, I really did like it, but I did not love it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link a wonderful, wonderful review of the book by Merecedes, because she said what I would not be able to articulate in a wonderful way. If you disengage the hype of the book from your experience, if you somehow manage to ignore the subject raised in the book and just treat it as any other literary work, your perception of the book might be different, but it's very difficult to do so. I think the idea behind the book was great. So you follow two sisters born of the same mother but different fathers, so half sisters, and one of them ends up marrying the British slave owner, basically the guy who ends up enslaving lots and lots of Africans and selling them to South America, Jamaica, the American states in the late 18th century. And she has subsequently a very different life from her half-sister, who ends up being enslaved and sold to work in a Georgian plantation. And you follow the life of the offsprings. So you have a story from each perspective, each generation, so from 1770s all the way to modern times. And I absolutely loved the book for about first 50%, because I felt that the characters were very real, they were very really described. They were people, and I could completely engage with them. And towards the end of the book, so the latter half of the book, I feel that she was maybe running out of time, and maybe she realized that the book, which is already 330 pages, was a bit too long, and she started to shorten the chapters. So some of the characters she described, they were just not real enough. I could not feel towards them what I felt towards the characters in the beginning of the book, and some of them just had to be subjected to unnecessary violence, I felt, just to make the point come across. And I'm also not particularly keen on the ending of the book. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I just felt that, like, I can see why she's done it, but for my liking it was a bit unnecessary. It's a good book, I will recommend it. However, I don't feel like it's the best debut novel I have read on the subject. I will read all the other books she publishes, because I think she will grow as a writer. Her writing style will become even more punctuated. She will have to spend less time describing things. She will develop her vocabulary, but I really, really, really liked it nonetheless. The last book I have read, which actually was the first one in order, it's the one I gave 3 stars, and that was the actual read for the Diverseathon this year. That was the group book of that year, and that's The Underground Railroad by Colson, Whitehead, and I just really did not feel for that book, and I've tried so hard to love it. I've really tried. It took me 4 days of slow read, and it was just dragging and dragging, and I really wanted to fall in love with it because of the high praise from the Obama and from Oprah Winfrey and from everyone else on the booktube. That book has so much love going towards it, and it just, the more I've tried to love it, the less it felt like a warm book. It's just, I found it so cold and so unpersonal. I could not emphasize with the main protagonist, Cora, in this book, and the whole book is her journey from horrible plantation conditions all the way up north and probably to Canada through the Underground Railroad. And I like the idea of the Underground Railroad being the actual Underground Railroad, like the physical thing, which we know it is an analogy, it's a metaphor, but he's made it real, which is fine with me. But all of the characters she encounters along her way, they're just secondary characters. They're not fully realized. That's the word I was looking for. They're not fully realized. They're just there to fill the gaps, I feel. They're very clinically described to serve the purpose. I feel that he obviously has done a lot of research to write this book. There's so many influences I've seen in this book. Just like I've seen with Homegoing. Like, Homegoing to me was so heavily based on Color Purple. Like, I could see references to that book throughout, even in the way the book was constructed, because Color Purple also settles in 2 countries, in the United States and in parallel in Africa, in the same region as the Homegoing. There's so many parallels, and I could see so many references to other works in the Underground Railroad, but I did not feel anything towards the characters. All of the horrific violence, like, yes, I understand that was horrible, like, I fully realize it was horrible, but is there a need to describe tortures in the way that we described? Just, it felt like he just wanted to create them on every single page, just to hammer the point to us. Well, as a reader who picks up this book, I already know what it's going to be about. I don't need that reminder. I don't want to see people die and being burned to death and the skin ripped in pieces for days on end. Like, you can mention it, and I have very vivid imagination, like, I can totally visualize it. I don't need 3 pages of it. I don't know. The only person to me who felt real in this whole book is, I think, the person who Colson Whitehead could relate to himself, and that's the owner of the Valentine farm towards the end of the book in Indiana, and the dilemma he had as a free man, and that he wanted to highlight the issue and make a difference in the world. I felt like that was the character the author could relate to, so he made him feel human. Everyone else just felt, I felt like I was watching a movie, and it was just like a movie I watch, but I don't emphasize towards to. I don't know if I described it well. I don't know, I'm quite disappointed with myself for not loving this book. I really wanted to, but it just did not happen. I don't know, I don't think I will read him in the near future, if ever, because I found myself dragged through this experience here, and that was difficult enough for me. So yeah, that were the 4 books I managed to read this week during the Diverseathon. I'm glad I've read these books. However, now I'm gonna need a break. I think I'm gonna read something much more light-hearted, maybe some detective stories for a while, or maybe more non-fiction. See you guys soon. Bye.